All right, looks like people are starting to join. So we're just going to give it a few minutes. We don't have very many signed on. We had about 10 people registered. So I'll just give it another minute or two for people to sign in, and then we'll get started. Try to reposition my camera a little bit. Okey-doke. Give it one more minute. We'll start about 10:03. All right, we'll just get started with some housekeeping stuff. So welcome, this is the self-defense seminar. I'm Amanda, I own Girl Fight Fitness. I'm gonna teach you some self-defense tactics that are gonna be easy for you to take away today. Just a few things about the Zoom. Just keep your mic muted at all times, just ensure that there's not ambient noise coming in. If I do see your mic go off mute, I'll just remute you. It's not to be rude or anything, it's just to make sure that we're not getting feedback. We have a really small group today, so if you have questions throughout, you can drop them in the chat, or you can just, unmute yourself quickly and chime in and I can answer that question. That's fine too. Usually with a small group, that's usually okay. We're going to go through a lot of things today that are good strategies to keep you safe. And I like to say that, self-defense is like having airbags in your car. You're glad they're there, but you hope they never deploy. And the same thing with self-defense is that you're glad you have these skills, but you hope you never have to use them. So that's why a lot of what we'll talk about in the beginning of this session is prevention tactics and de-escalation tactics, ways that you can avoid fighting altogether because you win 100% of the fights you never get into in the first place. All right, so let's start off with just some strategies and ways that you can stay safe in general in your daily life, because these are things that that will lower your chances of becoming an easy target. When criminals are looking for people to victimize and to rob or beat up or kidnap or whatever, they usually look for easy targets. And there are things that we can do in our daily life that will make us a much less easy target to get at. So some of these things, does anybody want to put in a chat any ideas that you have about ways, strategies to stay safe in general? I'll go through some, but if you have any things that just common sense stuff that we learned since kindergarten, feel free to drop in the chat and we'll talk about them. But just right off the bat, traveling in groups, there's power in numbers. Staying in large groups so that you're not alone. You're not becoming that easy target where someone can see you by yourself and say, okay, well, they don't have help, they don't have witnesses. That's going to be a much easier target and opportunity than somebody with a large group of friends with them. So trying to stay in groups. Trying not to go somewhere alone. Staying in well-lit areas is very important too, because it's visibility. If you can be seen, if there are others around you that can see, usually you're going to be a much less, a much harder target to go after than somebody who is in a dark area where there's very little visibility, very little witnesses. So looking for street lights, staying in well-populated areas, very active areas, not going down a shortcut, which is by yourself with nobody around so that you can potentially get into trouble, staying with people. Other ways are when you are parking your car, parking under a light, same thing with the visibility, is staying visible, having that light come illuminate everywhere around you. When you walk to your car, make sure you're not being followed. How do you know you're not being followed? There are a couple strategies. One of them, and the most important one, is to follow your gut. So listening to that little voice inside you that says, something's not right here, something's off. I've been seeing this person follow me over and over and over throughout the store. I get a sense that they're probably following me or up to something. Don't miss out on those opportunities to pick up on those signals, because what's happening when you have those instincts, like the pit in your stomach, hair stands up on the back of your neck, you're picking up on subconscious cues that you are not quite aware of in your processing brain. You're picking up on, and that's why your body is going to survival mode and saying, this isn't right, something's wrong here. Always trust those instincts. I'm actually a big Sherlock fan, so if you've seen the Sherlock show on Netflix, or it was actually on BBC first, but Benedict Cumberbatch, who plays Sherlock, kind of has this great line where he says, always pay attention to your instincts, because it's things you're noticing that you don't understand you're noticing. So I'm paraphrasing it. He says it in a much more quirky and brilliant way, but it's the same thing. When I heard him say that line, I was like, that's exactly what it is you're paying attention to things that your conscious brain isn't aware of. So always listening to your instincts. So don't be afraid to be paranoid to a certain extent. I say paranoid with quotation marks around it, because if you feel wrong, if you feel something's off, I'd rather be paranoid and alive than just brush it off and end up in trouble. So if you see somebody that you think is following you, don't be afraid to get help. If you're in a store, go to the store manager or an employee, ask for help. If you feel like you're walking to your car and someone's following you, turn right around, back around to the store or wherever you came from, where there's people, and just wait for them to figure out what they're doing. Maybe it was somebody who parked near you, but figure that out first and then go to your car. When you're walking to your car, always being aware of what's going on. And we'll go back to awareness a little bit in a second, because that's something that I think, especially in our modern society, is not as prevalent as it used to be. We have so many distractions that are distracting us from paying attention to and being in the moment, that it's much easier to get sidetracked. So looking around you as you're walking to your car, making sure people aren't following you. And then when you get to your car, look under the car, in the back of the car, in the front of the car. If you have like a hatchback trunk and you can easily look in the trunk, definitely a good idea to do that before you actually get into the car. So when you get into the car, only unlock the driver's side when you get in. Unless, of course, if you're with family or people, that's different. But if it's just you, only unlock the driver's side, so that way if somebody's kind of lingering off to the side, they can't just hop in your car as soon as you unlock it. And then as soon as you get in, lock all your doors. Get into a habit of hitting the lock all. Don't wait for that gear shift automated feature to kick in. As soon as you're in your car, lock all the car doors so someone can't sneak up on you and pull the back seat open. So let's go back to awareness, because that is a very important thing, is just be paying attention to your surroundings, keeping your head up, not being immersed in your phone, not be chatting on the phone with your friend. And there's a different way that you can use phone as a safety mechanism, but it doesn't involve, how was your day? Let me go into my tirade about what happened to me today. It's a way that you can say, okay, listen, stay on the line with me. I'm going to be looking around and I'm going to be aware, and I'm going to be making sure no one's following me, and then getting to my destination. Okay, I'll talk to you later, or talk to them on the car ride home, So there's ways that you can do that where you're staying aware, but not getting distracted. So the keys are, don't be distracted, stay aware. If you feel like somebody's following you, there are a couple tips that you can use. One is, if you're in a populated area and you're on foot, stop and pretend like you dropped your wallet or dropped something, or pretend like you're tying your shoe. What that does is it causes you to stop, bend down. When you're bent down, look over your shoulder, see if they stopped. Because if they stopped, rather than walk on by you, chances are they're probably following you. They want to keep distance and not lose you. If you're in your car and you think you're being followed, you keep seeing the same car over and over and over again, do not go home. Do not drive to your destination. Instead, start making turns in one direction. Either pick left or right. Keep making left turns, keep making right turns. Because essentially what you're doing is going in a circle. And the only person also going to be going in a circle is going to be somebody who's following you. So once you get that confirmation, that's when you call the police on your cell phone, or you find the nearest police station to drive to. Ideally, of course, calling the police, calling 911, follow their instructions, because they're trained to guide you to where they're going to get you help as soon as possible. So that's kind of a primer on things to do to stay safe in general. There's little tips and tricks. Nothing guarantees your safety, but there's little things that you can do to make your likelihood of becoming an easy target much lower. So now let's talk about opportunities where we need to identify, is it a situation where I should fight, or is it a situation where I should just be compliant? So if someone approaches you and says, give me your wallet, give me your keys, give me your cell phone, even if they haven't produced a weapon yet, That's an opportunity where if it can be replaced, give it to them and hope they go away. You can always cancel your credit cards. You can always shut down your bank account. You can file an insurance claim for your car. These are things that you can do to replace and be made whole again. But if it's your life on the line, that can't be replaced. So if someone is trying to hurt you, trying to take you somewhere you don't want to go, trying to hurt somebody with you, those are the opportunities where standing up and defending yourself is probably appropriate. So often I get asked, well, what if they just come walk up to you and go, give me your keys? I'm not going to give them my keys. First of all, you have to assume that's not a normal thing that somebody says to another person. So you have to assume somebody saying that is unstable, dangerous, or potentially both. That's not something that a normal person who has no intent to do you harm comes up and says to you. The second thing, and this is actually based on a story that somebody told me who took a seminar before, just because they haven't produced a weapon yet doesn't mean they might not have one. So if they say, give me your wallet, and you say no, and all of a sudden the weapon comes out and it could be a gun, it's a different situation now. It's much dangerous. Even the self-defense tactics I'm going to show you, once a gun comes out, it changes the game entirely, and the probability of getting out of that situation safely goes down exponentially. So if we can avoid making that weapon appear, of course we're going to do that. And the story is that's exactly what happened to somebody, where it was her husband at the time was approached, and the guy said, give me your cell phone. He said no, and the guy took out a gun and shot him. Luckily he's okay, but that's the kind of mentality we're dealing with, where, we have these prideful things, these objects that we value, and we don't want to give them away to somebody. But in reality, if somebody's asking for those things, they probably are not somebody you want to roll the dice and see if they're ultimately going to hurt you or not. So definitely, if it's something that can be replaced, avoid fighting. So in terms of approaching now going into a fight, we have to think about the three main strategies. And this is where I'm going to turn to my whiteboard, and I might take some adjusting or repositioning to kind of get the view of it, and also so that I don't block the whole thing. So I'll play with it a little bit. So the first thing that there's three main strategies or phases that we want to go through when we are talking about any encounter. So the first is avoidance, and I'm going to try to write as legibly as I can. Avoid fighting if at all possible. So those are the things that I talked about up front. Very important things, not as glamorous as actually learning how to take down an attacker, but also much more important, because if you never have to use the stuff I'm about to show you, I think that's a victory. So avoid fighting if at all possible. Talk them down. If somebody's threatening you, just say, all right, calm down. Do you want my wallet? Do you want my keys? Here, let me give them to you. And also, if you're going to give them something, do not hand it to them. Toss it to them on the ground, sideways, off to the side, because if they reach down to get it, you're going to turn and you're going to run, and you're going to get out of that situation. So that's a nice little tip, because running is always preferable to staying and fighting. So avoidance. And then if you cannot avoid, the progression goes, do not stop fighting. Once you make the decision to fight, do not stop until you can safely get away. That's very important, because once you determine that you are going to hurt this person or try to hurt this person, you're telling them new information. And if you're not successful, where if you hit them once and go, okay, wait, just kidding, they're going to treat you differently now. Maybe they didn't tie your hands before. Now they're going to tie your hands. They're going to treat you a lot more differently if they know you are a fighter versus if they have the illusion that they have the upper hand temporarily. So once you kind of make that decision where I got to fight, you kick, you punch, you grab, you scream, you do whatever you need to do. You mix up the combinations I'm going to show you shortly. You do not stop until you can safely get away. And then the third step in this progression is run. The way to successfully get out of an altercation is not making them unconscious. It's not putting them on the ground. It's not killing them, but heaven's sake, don't do that. But it's not getting to the point where you are the clear winner of the fight by UFC standards or boxing standards. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about getting away with your life. So as soon as you have the opportunity to run, as soon as that occurs to you in your brain and you can run, make lots of noise, and call the police. So yelling, screaming, getting attention on you. Even if you don't know, if you don't see anyone around you, you can be heard. Someone can hear you who you don't visually see, but can hear you. And the other thing too is your attacker doesn't want to get caught. They're not doing this because they think they're going to jail. They are doing this because they think they're going to get away with it. So if you present attraction, running, noise, screaming, drawing attention, they might just pack it in and go home after their plan got foiled because they don't want to risk getting caught. So there's lots of advantages to making noise. And then any encounter, no matter how minor, call the police and get a police report on file. So, example being, if someone's messing around with you, you feel that your life is in jeopardy, you kick them between the legs, and now they can't have children anymore. Technically, could they try to sue you for that? Probably. They could try. Would they be successful? Probably not, but they can try. You can try to sue anybody in this country for whatever, but the reason why you want to call the police is get your side of the story on file first, and also make it so that they can go find this guy and so he doesn't do it to anybody else. So just a couple of tips for that. So this is kind of the trajectory of where we want to go with our progression is avoid fighting if at all possible. If you can't avoid it and you have to fight, do not stop until you can safely get away. And then once you have the opportunity, whether it's one kick between the legs and your gut says go, they might still be on their feet, but you feel like you have that split-second shot, you run, make lots of noise, and call the police. All right, so let me wipe this down, and then we're going to talk about the psychology of fighting. And the things I'm going to show you are not the things that you will see in a boxing match or things that you're going to see in a UFC fight, because they're what's called dirty fighting, which is the only way to make a fight fair out in the real world, because most of us, this is a women's self-defense seminar. We are dealing with opponents who are probably stronger, we have to assume more trained. You can't make assumptions about somebody. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt and just make the assumption that they are more skilled, faster, smarter. They're already one step ahead because they know what they're going to do before you do. So you're going to be in a reaction mode automatically. You are already at a disadvantage, and that disadvantage isn't just psychological. It's usually also physical, in terms of size, in terms of weight. So you need to even the fight in any way that you can. And it's not going to be by obeying strict boxing rules with your hands up for 3-minute rounds. It's not going to be the case. What you have to do is do tactics that are going to make it you at an advantage. And these are strategies that are actually illegal in fighting for those reasons, is because they put the other party, the one who inflicts this kind of damage, at an extreme advantage and the other person at an extreme disadvantage. So when we talk about these things, I want to explain why this works. So anytime we have to react or do an action, there are 4 stages we have to go through. We have to perceive, we have to analyze, we have to formulate, and we have to execute. Okay? So anytime we need to make a decision, our brain goes through this process. This is true for you, this is true for your attacker. Perceive, meaning I actually have to see what's happening. I have to visually see the thing taking place. It could be this person is approaching me with their hand raised. That could be what I perceive. Now, what I have to do next is analyze that. What does that mean? It means that maybe they're trying to hit me, okay? So then you have to formulate a plan. What am I going to do? Am I going to block? Am I going to run? Am I going to, fight back? And then you actually have to execute that plan, which means you actually have to tell your body to do the thing that you came up with to respond to that thing you perceived. So you have to go through all these steps no matter what it is, even if it's picking up a mug off the counter. Now, these takes milliseconds to run through. Your brain is very quick, but you still have to do them. So our intention is, remember, our attacker already has the upper hand. They're going to be attacking us before we know that it's going to happen. So if that's the case and they're already one step ahead, we need to make sure that we are putting them backwards and catching up. So what we do is we create damage. And what that damage does is it will bounce them back to the top of the process. So creating damage, as they start to, let's say we hit them. Okay, we hit them, they're starting to analyze and what happened, and then we hit them again and we bounce them back. And then they're going through again, then we hit them again and we bounce them back. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to cut off the full execution of this process. And in doing so, we're going to be able to stay one step ahead. It's going to buy us the most valuable thing in any fight, which is time. Time to think, time to adapt, time to plan a strategy, time to find an escape route, time to actually make sure that you can come out on top of this, okay? So that's why creating damage and using the strategies I'm going to talk about are so important, is because in order to get the upper hand on someone who is bigger, stronger, potentially more skilled, already one step ahead of you, you need to buy yourself time by interrupting their thought process, causing damage, and continuing to put them into this endless loop where they're kind of stunned and they don't know how to respond yet because you are creating such damage for them, okay? So let's go in here. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is targets. So targets are things that technically anything can be a target. So we'll do targets. Can't spell this morning. You can tell it's the weekend. All right. So technically anything can be a target, okay? Anything can be a target. But what we're looking for is key targets that we can hit very easily, because we're not, let's be real, none of us are trained MMA fighters. I mean, I have some self-defense background, but I don't want to get in any fights or anything. So, but most of us, we don't want to go home for 4 hours a day, 7 days a week and practice techniques and wrist grabs and holds and things like that. We want to be able to do things that we can do very quickly without very much skill, and it's going to be very effective. So the targets that we're going to be looking for are ones that damage. So damage, so causing pain. Pain, remember, pain is going to be that mechanism that keeps kicking their brain back to the beginning of that process. We're also going to be looking at ones that could potentially disbalance. So making a limb unusable, setting them off balance, potentially making them unconscious. All these things could be things that will allow us to run away and get out of there. And the third thing is to disrupt. So this could be disrupting breathing, could be disrupting sight. It could be things that is going to make it much harder for them to actually counteract or respond to what we're doing. And it's going to buy us that time to get out, okay? So before we talk about where to actually hit someone on the body, we're also going to be talking about another key component, which is range. And I'm going to leave targets up there because we're going to talk about targets in a second rather than write it twice. So range, whiteboard's coming down. So range is critical because it makes a difference if this is your attacker. You can see my wonderful art skills right now. And then this is you. It makes a difference how much space is between you. Because if you are at enough range where you can throw a kick and land it successfully, probably means you're too far away to throw a punch because your arm is shorter than your leg. Now, what's going to be effective if you're trying to catch somebody off guard? Is it going to be more effective at that to throw one kick up, or is it going to be more effective to run at them until you're close enough to hit them in the face? Clearly the first one, because it's going to catch them off guard. It's going to be much faster. If you're running at somebody like this, I'm going to get you, they're going to see that coming. So thinking about range and the attacks that you can do at these different ranges. So we talk about 3 main ranges. So this one would be long range. Okay. And that would be usually kicks, kick territory right there. I have yet to encounter anybody who has arms longer than their legs. So That's where we're talking about kicks. Now the next one, kind of medium range. This is where probably punches, palm strikes, things where you're using the full length of your arm would connect. And then we'll get another color, it'll be colorful today. We've got close range here. So close range is that's going to be, oh, I got it right close. That's going to be elbows, knees, things where you're right on top of that person and you won't be able to swing back with your leg to do a kick. And you might not be able to pull back hard enough to do a punch. You might be able to do a gouge with your fingers if you're that close. But usually you have to think about, where am I in terms of that person and what tool is going to do the best and quickest job possible, because that's a very valid component. If it doesn't make sense, if you're too close to kick, don't kick, knee them. You know, if you're too far away to kick or too far away to punch, then kick them. So those are considerations that not many people talk about when we're doing self-defense, but they're very valid because that makes a huge difference. If you pick the right tool for the situation, your chance of success is going to be exponentially higher. Okay, so now let's talk about the targets on the body. So I'm going to draw my wonderful stick figure. Okay. So targets, what we're looking for. Remember what we're talking about earlier. We're looking for areas that are very, what's it called? Vulnerable, cause a lot of damage, a lot of pain, could potentially disbalance somebody, or could potentially disrupt the sense. And don't get me wrong, if you have very limited targets available, you hit anything that you can get at. But if you have your choice, you have the luxury of making the choice, there are some targets that are easier to access, are going to cause a lot more pain for the amount of low pressure you have to put on them and give you much more payoff. So the first one we're going to talk about, actually, this is my favorite target is the groin. And what I like about using this as a target is not only does it cause a huge amount of pain, and it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, it causes pain very much so, no matter what your gender is, but it is very accessible at all the ranges, the long range, the medium range, and the close range, because you can knee the groin, you can kick the groin, even if you're at your medium range and you're hitting it with your shin bone instead of your foot, it's still going to cause a lot of damage there. So groin kicks and knees to the groin, very simple. You already know how to do it. If you can kick a soccer ball or a football, you can kick the groin, no problem. And when you're doing it, throw it in there with conviction. Don't mess around. Make sure that you're putting every ounce of energy into it. So when you're doing your groin strike, if it doesn't get the intended reaction that you want the first time, do it again. Hit them again. Keep hitting until you get the desired reaction, or until you get to the point where, well, something's not working here. They must be wearing like a cup or, something going on. And then that's where you'll adapt and change your targets, which is why we're going over more than just one target, because I could just tell you, just hit them in the groin, and that would be the end of it if that was that simple, but it's not. So groin is a great target to go for. The next best target that is very vulnerable is the eyes. And what is great about the eyes is those are tied, it's vision. If they can't see you, chances are you're going to be able to run away pretty quickly or pretty easily. So when you go for the eyes, we're not going to do the Three Stooges. We're not going to do the Kill Bill. You're going to keep your fingers wide and loose. So when you throw that strike, you're going to go out and in, very quick flick, out and in. And those eyes, you're going to keep them wide and loose because it gives you much more surface area. The eye is a very small target, so you're getting 4 or 5 chances to actually connect. Because keep in mind, they're not going to stand there and be like, hit me in the eyes. They're going to be moving. They're going to be a moving target. So you need as much chance to hit that target as possible. So going for the eyes. And then when you pull it back, pull it right back. Don't leave it hanging out there because you don't want your arm to get grabbed. So throw the strike out and in, keep the fingers loose. So if you miss and hit the bridge of the head or something like that, your fingers will bounce back and they won't jam up. You don't want to keep them rigid and then break your hand. All right, next, let's talk about the nose. The nose is very easy to break. It causes a lot of pain and it causes a lot of bleeding, and it can even trigger the sinuses and obstruct the eyes and obstruct vision. So The nose, to hit that nose, you're not going to punch the nose. The reason not is because you'll probably break your hand. We want to keep our hands healthy because that's going to be how the weapons, you don't know how long this fight is going to be going. So this is how you protect yourself, is with your hands and your feet. So we want to try to keep our limbs as healthy as possible. With that said, if you start to go in for a punch, commit to it and finish it and deal with your broken hand afterwards. You can always use the side of your hand to chop if you need to. But the problem with starting the punch and going, oh wait, just kidding, and then changing it to a palm strike is you lose your opportunity. So I would rather, it's like stealing a base in baseball. Commit to it, go for it. Even if it's a mistake, at least that's going to be a better opportunity than trying to, oh wait, this, that takes time and that's going to sacrifice your chance. So if you can think of it, use the heel of your palm in a slight upward motion. Upward would probably make sense naturally because statistically your attacker will probably be taller than you. If not, you can dip down with your knees and kind of come up like this to kind of get an upward strike. And it's going to hit here. It's going to break the nose. It's going to cause a lot of bleeding, a lot of pain, and potentially give you that opportunity to get away. All right, next, a very little known target, but the ears. So what's nice about going for the ears is that the eardrums are very vulnerable. There's very little protection on them, and you can cause a lot of pain to somebody by busting their eardrums. And the way you would do that is cupping your hands. And please don't do that. None of this stuff you should be doing at home to your spouse or your siblings or anything like that. This stuff can really damage somebody, sometimes permanently. I mean, we're not sticking around to see if they're okay. If they're an attacker and they're really trying to hurt us, they deserve what they got. So, but definitely not don't try this at home. Don't horse around with your friends. Don't do anything like that. This one especially, because you can really accidentally hurt someone with very little pressure. But when you do that, you're going to cup your hands and clap across either side of their ears. And what that's going to drive the air through and potentially bust their eardrum. It's going to cause them a lot of pain. And what it can do is also affect the inner ear, which affects balance. So if you disbalance that person, the chances that they're going to actually be running after you afterwards is very small. All right, so we're talking about ears, eyes, nose, throat. Throat is the next one. So the throat, if anybody guesses what it's tied to, it's airway, it's breathing. So if they can't breathe, if they can't catch air, chances are they're not going to be too concerned with you at that point. It becomes survival at that point where it's between you and living at that point. And they're going to be more concerned with catching their breath than they are about your whereabouts. To hit the throat, you're going to create an L shape with your hand. And those of you at home, if you just want to like gently put pressure here on your throat, it's uncomfortable. If that's coming in full speed with a strike out and in, that's probably going to choke up the windpipe. It might break the trachea. We're not sticking around to see if they're okay. We're getting out of there. So that can be a very effective maneuver to do with that L shape. Sometimes people ask, do I go high or low? You're not going to have the luxury to pick. That person's going to be moving. So you just aim for the general neck area, and wherever it lands, it lands. All right. So, and I want to take a second to note that you notice the eyes, the nose, the throat strikes. It's all eyes, nose, throat. It's the same hand movement. It's just what's on the end of the hand and where is it going. And the reason for that is I want to keep it simple for you, because if I teach you, okay, this is wrist lock number 32, and you have to memorize all the 31s before, it's not going to be practical because it's going to confuse you. You're already going to be stressed. Your adrenaline's going to be pumping. You might freeze up even if you know exactly what to do. These things have to be very easy to access, very simple to remember, and easy to perform. So that's why we're simplifying things so much, is because it's no good to you how effective it is if you can't remember to do it or don't have the right technique to do it. So then we've got eyes, nose, throat, ears, groin. The last key target that we're going to talk about is knees. So the knees are a very vulnerable joint. And it's one of the reasons why it's one of the most common sports injuries, is because the knee is only designed to go in one direction. It's a hinge joint. So it's only designed to go forward and back. It's not meant to be a rotational joint like your hip or your shoulder joint. So all we have to do is put it out of that path. And you can do that very easily. You could stomp forward right on the knee. You could do a side kick and kick the knee from the side. You basically want to put pressure on the knee so that the joint is going to be slanted out of the, so if this is the way it's going normally, you want to put it off kilter. You want to make it so maybe you break the leg or tear the ACL. There's a lot of, I don't want to say wonderful, but there's a lot of helpful things that you can do to do damage to that knee to ensure your ability to get away safely. So those are kind of the key targets on the body. There are more, of course, you know, but these are the ones that if you have the luxury of choice, they're going to be your best chances for success in coming out of that altercation and safely, is causing a lot of damage with very, very little effort. So now let's talk about something that people ask about, and they talk about, sometimes I get asked about headbutts. And the headbutt, there's a reason why I don't want you to use your head as a weapon. And it's because your brain is the control center for everything. So if you take somebody's head and take your head and clunk them together like that, that's really not going to be productive if you both fall down unconscious. That's going to be bad. You can, when we talked about breaking your hand earlier, you can fight back with a busted hand. That's fine. If you are unconscious, it's game over. So you don't want to use your head as a weapon if you can avoid it. Now, a scenario where this could be a practical exit plan. All right, so that's you. And then here's the attacker with a bear hug, okay? And of course, it's much looser than it would be when they have their arms right around you, okay? If you're not facing them, so if you're facing this way, okay, I put a frown because they're not happy that this is happening. There's not a lot you can do because you can't see your attacker. You know, you're not facing them, so you can't strike them head on. Your arms are pinned down, so you can't really do much. But what you could do in this situation is another color, reverse headbutt here. Now this headbutt is a little different because it is the hard part of the back of your head going into the soft place in somebody's front of the face. So that headbutt's going to do a lot more damage to them than it is to you. And since you only have limited options in this scenario, probably a better option than doing nothing. Okay, so then also another option you could have is a toe stomp. So taking your foot and just stomping. You could also donkey kick into the groin. And mixing these things up, and it's going to be luck and chance because you're going to have to estimate where that person is. So you could donkey kick back into the groin, toe stomp their foot, headbutt. And if you can cause enough pain where you can at least wiggle your arms out of their grasp, you could do elbows to the face or elbows to the groin, depending on their height, okay? So that's one situation where we kind of do a little bit of exception to the rule and say that headbutts could be okay. Now, in applying these principles, because we now know the basics, we know, okay, where to strike somebody, what, you know, to consider the range. Now we have to talk about, like, well, what makes sense in a given scenario. Now, if you have somebody where they are substantially taller than you, and I'm just exaggerating, this is like me with Shaquille O'Neal, I'm 5'2", so like, okay, it doesn't make sense for me to go for the eyes, the nose, the throat, because I'm not going to reach, right? So what can I go after? Go for the knees, go for the groin. I could go for smaller targets that are accessible to me, and who knows, I could hit them in the groin, they bend over, and now I have access to the head, and I can do some of those eye strikes and things like that. So one of the things you need to think about is what attacks are actually going to work on this person, because it's great and fine and good if I tell you to go for the eyes, but if you can't reach the eyes, or let's say the person's wearing glasses and you can't actually access those eyes where they have that protection. Those are things to consider in these scenarios where you need to kind of think about, is this going to work? Like, is this realistic? What is going to work for me? And make it happen. And like I said, mixing up the targets too. If something's not working, don't be afraid to change the target, to try something different. If you're kicking the groin and it's not working, go for the knee or go for the eyes. If you're going for the eyes and you miss, try to hit the throat. Continuing, that's that second rule. Do not stop until you can safely get away. So that's kind of what we want to do with this, is make sure that we are being persistent until we have that sliver of opportunity. And that sliver of opportunity could be a split second. But if you feel you have enough time to get away at that point, you run, make lots of noise, and call the police. All right, so that's pretty much the bulk of the basics. I know we only covered the surface area really of self-defense 101 because it is a lot of stuff. There's so many different situations and scenarios, but these are actually the basics that, at least if you start with, you kind of will know how to defend yourself if you do have to get into a situation where you need to defend yourself in order to escape. So I know we went a little fast because it's a very small group and we tend to go faster when it's a small group when there are less questions. But I wanted to open it up for chat and discussion now. So if you have a question of something you want clarified that I talked about, or if you have a specific situation where you have specific questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll hang out for about the next 5 minutes or longer, but I'll hang out for a few minutes to see if we get any questions. But, hopefully this kind of stuff will make you feel safer in general. It's never a good idea to walk around parading like you're tough stuff and, self-defense. Remember those things that we talked about in the beginning. Still be vigilant. Travel in numbers, travel in well-lit areas. But for now, I'm just going to pause for a minute or two, see if we have questions in the chat. And if we do, we can talk about them. And if we don't, that's fine too. All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions right now, but if you do have questions, feel free to let me know. I'm going to be sending out the recording of this session to everybody who signed up afterwards. You can always respond and say, hey, Amanda, I have this question I didn't really want to ask in the seminar. Or if you just want more clarification or information, I'll be in touch soon after the seminar. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you had a great amount of information that you were able to absorb, and just stay safe out there. All right. Bye, everybody.